Okay, so the whole electric vehicle revolution, it's huge, right? More than just changing cars, it's really shaking up global supply chains.
Absolutely, especially when you look at the batteries.
Exactly, the batteries, the demand is just, well, soaring, and it's creating this really complex scramble for uh, resources and just reliable ways to make them.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as just ramping up production lines.
Yeah.
You're talking about this incredibly tangled web, you know, raw materials, manufacturing, getting them where they need to go.
And all of that impacted by politics, new tech.
Precisely. Geopolitics, tech changes, it all feeds in.
And that whole complex challenge is what we're really going to unpack today. We've got this fantastic case study. It's from Cognitive Market Research, CMR.
I'll see you, Mark. Yeah.
It takes us right inside how one major car maker tackled this massive issue, securing their EV battery supply. And it wasn't easy for them.
No, far from it.
Yeah.
This manufacturer, they really had a perfect storm of problems. Getting the raw materials reliably, lithium, cobalt, nickel, that was tough.
Yeah.
And then you layer on things like geopolitical tensions. That just messes with availability, stability, pricing.
Right. So it wasn't just could they get the stuff, but could they count on getting it? Their initial setup, well, it lacked resilience, you could say.
Yeah, resilience, transparency. They didn't have great visibility into potential problems and not much flex to, adapt when things went wrong.
And the case study points out something pretty stark, right? How depending on just one supplier could cause major headaches.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It gives this specific example relying on one supplier, and that supplier was in a place with export restrictions. Boom. Vehicle delivery delays.
How long were we talking?
Up to 3 months.
3 months. Wow. You can imagine the ripple effect of that.
Exactly. It impacts everything down the line.
And it wasn't just the operational side. There was also pressure, mounting pressure from customers, regulators.
About the environmental side.
Yeah, environmental footprint, carbon emissions from making the batteries, but also ethical stuff like labor conditions.
Right, the sourcing piece.
Yeah.
Very important now.
So a multifaceted problem. Our mission then for this deep dive, figure out how this company, working with CMR, navigated all this complexity.
And what we can all learn from it, really,
Yeah.
for building supply chains that are, stronger, more sustainable.
Okay, let's zoom in on that initial bottleneck first. The raw materials, lithium, cobalt, nickel.
Yeah, these aren't materials you find everywhere, right? They're concentrated in certain parts of the world.
So that automatically creates dependencies.
It does. And as EV demand just exploded, the competition for these minerals got fierce. Prices started bouncing around like crazy.
It really is like a modern gold rush, isn't it? But for battery metals. And this manufacturer, they learned the hard way about relying too heavily on one source.
Definitely. Putting all your eggs in one basket, especially if that basket is in an unstable region, it's just asking for trouble.
Your whole production schedule is suddenly vulnerable to, I don't know, a political spat or a shipping breakdown somewhere far away.
Precisely. And the lack of transparency you mentioned earlier. That just made it worse.
How so?
Well, if you don't really know where your materials are coming from, or how they're being sourced, or where the weak links are, how can you possibly manage the risks?
Right. You're flying blind. So the big question becomes, how do you get that visibility, that end-to-end understanding?
Well, this is where CMR came in. The case study talks about their approach. They called it multi-pronged.
Okay, so not just one silver bullet.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
It's an integrated set of strategies, hitting the problems from different angles.
Makes sense for a complex issue. What was foundational?
Diversification was key, big time. Instead of being locked into just a few suppliers, they deliberately went out and built relationships with multiple sources.
Spread the risk.
Exactly. Multiple suppliers across different regions. That immediately reduces the power any single supplier has and buffers against, problems in one specific area.
Classic risk management. Good stuff. But they also look beyond just finding more lithium and cobalt, right? They explored different materials like manganese.
Yes, that was another angle, bringing in alternatives like manganese-rich cathodes.
What's the thinking there? Is manganese easier to get?
It can be. The idea is to lessen the pressure on those really critical, high-demand, sometimes volatile materials like cobalt and nickel. Manganese might offer better availability, maybe more stable pricing.
Ah, okay. So it gives them options, a bit of a buffer.
And it pushes innovation in battery chemistry, too, which is never a bad thing.
Interesting. So diversifying suppliers, diversifying your materials.
Yeah.
What else? The ethical side came up earlier.
Hugely important. CMR helped them set up partnerships only with certified suppliers, people committed to, proper global standards.
So audits and checks?
Rigorous due diligence,
Yeah.
yeah. Checking on labor practices, making sure environmental rules were followed. This isn't just, like, nice to have CSR stuff
No,
anymore.
it protects the brand, right?
Yeah,
Consumers care.
they absolutely do. It avoids legal trouble, reputational damage. It's core business now.
Okay, so ethical sourcing covered. Now, back to that transparency issue. How did they tackle actually seeing into the supply chain? I think you mentioned tech.
Yeah, they brought in blockchain.
Ah, okay. How does that help here?
Well, blockchain lets you track the raw materials in essentially real time,
Hmm.
from the moment they're dug out of the ground through every step of processing and production.
And it's secure, like people can't tamper with the records.
That's the idea. It creates this immutable digital record, a trail. So it's much easier to verify where something came from, that it was sourced ethically. It provides that trust.
Fascinating. A digital ledger for the whole journey. What other tech did they use? AI came up.
It did. AI-powered predictive analytics.
Okay, what does that do in this context?
Two main things. One, better demand forecasting. So the manufacturer gets a much clearer picture of how many batteries they're likely to need, reducing the chance of getting caught short.
Right. Planning ahead.
And two, it acts like an early warning system. The AI can analyze data streams and potentially flag upcoming disruptions in the supply chain. Maybe a strike brewing, a weather event.
Giving them time to react.
Exactly. Crucial lead time to maybe switch suppliers, reroute shipments, put contingency plans into action before the disruption hits hard.
Smart. Proactive rather than reactive. And then there were digital twins. That sounds very sci-fi.
It does sound a bit futuristic, but it's actually a really practical tool. A digital twin is basically a detailed virtual copy of your entire supply chain.
Okay, so like a simulation.
Precisely. You can run what-if scenarios
Yeah.
on this virtual model. What if this port closes? What if this mine has an issue? You simulate the disruption and see the impact.
Without actually messing up your real operations.
Exactly. You can test out different solutions, different contingency plans in the simulation, see what works best, all completely risk-free. It's about building resilience through experimentation.
That is incredibly clever. Building resilience virtually before you need it in reality. The case study also mentioned something about where they actually made the batteries.
Yes, localization. A very important strategic move. They set up battery production facilities much closer to their actual car assembly plants.
Ah, bringing it closer to home, essentially.
Right, shorter distances. That cuts down transportation costs significantly, slashes lead times.
Fewer chances for things to go wrong in transit, too, I bet.
Absolutely. It streamlines the whole logistics chain and makes it less vulnerable to those long-distance disruptions. Plus, there's an environmental benefit to lower transport emissions.
It makes total sense. And they didn't stop there, did they? They also thought about what happens when the batteries reach the end of their life.
Yes, embracing the circular economy. Really critical for long-term sustainability.
So recycling programs.
Robust recycling programs, yeah. To recover valuable materials, lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, from used EV batteries.
Which reduces the need to mine new stuff.
Exactly. It lessens the environmental impact of mining and eases the pressure on sourcing those raw materials. They partnered with specialized recycling companies using advanced tech to maximize recovery, closing the loop.
It really feels like they looked at every single angle. A very holistic approach.
It had to be. And CMR's role wasn't just the tech and strategy side, right? They helped with the policy stuff too.
That's right. They actually facilitated dialogues, brought policymakers, suppliers, tech providers all into the same room.
Why was that important?
Well, navigating regulations can be tricky. They're always changing. This helped the manufacturer understand the landscape, adapt, but also maybe find opportunities.
Like government grants or incentives for sustainable practices.
Exactly. It positioned them well to potentially access that kind of support. So it was this real partnership, bridging the gap between the company's needs and the wider ecosystem.
Okay, so that's the solution set. How did CMR actually figure all this out? What was their research process like?
Well, they started with a deep dive, a real diagnostic of the existing supply chain, mapping everything out.
Finding the pain points.
Precisely. Where were the material shortages hitting hardest? Which suppliers were they too dependent on? Where were the logistical logjams? Just getting a clear picture of the S.
Okay, makes sense. Understand the problem first. Then what? Then came data gathering. Lots of it. Talking to everyone involved, people inside the manufacturer, their suppliers, industry experts.
Getting different perspectives.
Yep. Plus, digging into market intelligence reports, seeing what competitors are doing, looking for best practices, and crucially, doing those detailed risk assessments we talked about earlier.
Evaluating the geopolitical risks, environmental factors.
Exactly. Quantifying those risks as much as possible.
So a real 360-degree view. And once they had all that data,
They started modeling, using advanced techniques to forecast demand more accurately and, importantly, to simulate different supply chain setups.
like using those digital twins.
That was part of it, yes. Testing the potential effectiveness of different strategies. More suppliers here, a factory there, before committing real resources. Very data-driven.
Moving beyond just gut instinct. And it sounds like they didn't just drop off a report and leave.
No, not at all. The case study emphasizes ongoing support. Regular progress reviews, training sessions for the manufacturers' teams.
To make sure the changes actually stuck.
Exactly. Implementation is everything, making sure people understood the new processes, the new tools, and could actually use them effectively day to day.
Right. So the big question, did it all work? What were the actual results?
The results look pretty impressive, actually. That diversification strategy. It demonstrably cut their reliance on those high-risk regions, created a much more stable inflow of material.
Okay, good start. What about the tech? The AI?
The predictive analytics paid off. They saw a 20% reduction in production delays.
20%. That's substantial. That goes straight to the bottom line and customer satisfaction.
Absolutely. And the move to localized production.
What impact did that have?
A 30% cut in logistical costs.
Mm-hmm.
Think transportation, warehousing, big savings there.
30% is huge. And the recycling efforts?
Also very successful. They achieved a 50% recovery rate for key materials from old batteries.
Wow, half the valuable stuff coming back into the loop. That's significant for sustainability.
It really is. And beyond the numbers, there was a reputational benefit, too.
How so?
The company gained real recognition as a leader in doing things the right way, responsible sourcing, sustainable practices.
And that matters to people.
It does. It boosted their brand image, attracted partners, built consumer trust, and it actually translated into sales.
Really? How much?
A 15% increase in EV sales in the first year after these changes were implemented.
15%. So doing good really was good for business here.
It absolutely seems that way. Plus, they successfully navigated all those complex regulations, avoided fines, and even managed to secure some incentives.
Which just adds to the competitive advantage.
Exactly.
So if we were to sum up the key benefits, it sounds like a genuine transformation.
It really does. This revamped supply chain let them properly grab the opportunity in the booming EV market. They built something robust, transparent, sustainable, aligned with where they wanted to go strategically.
And the diversification, the localization, the analytics that tackled the risks ensured they could actually get the materials they needed.
Right. It smoothed out those bumps, mitigated the geopolitical jitters.
And the focus on ethics and the circular economy clearly built trust, both with big stakeholders and everyday consumers.
For sure. And you look at the forecasts, right? The global EV market is projected to hit, what, USD 800 billion by
Yep.
2030?
An incredible number.
And this manufacturer is now in a prime position to capture a growing slice of that pie. These changes weren't just fixes. They solidified a real competitive edge.
They basically set a new benchmark for the industry, didn't they? On sustainable mobility, responsible manufacturing.
I think you could definitely argue that.
It's just a powerful example of how tackling big challenges head-on with a smart, multi-layered approach can really turn things around, create major advantages.
Absolutely.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've seen just how complex these EV battery supply chains are and how vital things like diversification, transparency, and real ethical sourcing are becoming.
Yeah, and we've also seen the power of using data smartly predictive analytics, simulation with digital twins, plus the strategic logic of localization and the long-term necessity of that circular economy thinking.
And the results for this car maker really underline the benefits. Fewer delays, lower costs, better sustainability credentials, stronger reputation.
And more sales. Can't forget that.
Definitely not. So thinking about all this, here's a final thought maybe for you, our listener, to chew on. Given what we've learned from this specific case in the auto industry, what might be the wider lessons here for other industries facing their own supply chain headaches in this, well, pretty volatile global landscape?
Yeah. What innovative strategies could they borrow or adapt, drawing from these kinds of insights to build their own more resilient, more sustainable futures? Good question to ponder.